Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story. Beijing is ramping up pressure on Taiwan, flying a surveillance drone into the island's airspace for the first time. Plus, Chinese fishing boats form massive barriers in waters between China, Taiwan, and Japan. 3 Chinese nationals have been arrested in South Korea for allegedly laundering over $100 million in cryptocurrency. Authorities reveal how they uncovered a scheme that reportedly ran for years. Israel's military suspends Chinese-made electric vehicles over cybersecurity concerns, why experts warn these cars could be used for Chinese espionage. A 5-month-old baby died during a cardiac surgery. It became one of the hottest topics on Chinese social media. Why do some say it's more than what meets the eye? Britain has approved China's largest ever European embassy in London as its prime minister prepares for a possible visit to Beijing. Why is the UK allowing the project near critical financial data infrastructure despite major protests and with no objections from Britain's spy service? We break down what experts are saying. The Chinese Communist Party quietly upping its pressure on Taiwan. China flew a surveillance drone into Taiwan's airspace for the first time on Saturday. Taiwan's defense ministry said the reconnaissance drone entered the airspace of Pratas, an island controlled by Taiwan. Pratas sits 250 miles away from Taiwan's main island. The drone flew above the range of Taiwan's air defense systems. It left the area after Taiwan issued warnings. Taiwan's defense minister has previously said that if a Chinese aircraft or other military asset enters the island's airspace, it can be considered a first strike. He added that Taiwan would be justified in responding for self-defense. 2 Taiwanese officials told the Financial Times that the island would be extremely careful to prevent any incident at Pratas from escalating into a bigger conflict. Moving north to the East China Sea, the waters between China, Taiwan, and Japan, China has also carried out unusual exercises in recent weeks. The 2 separate instances, the regime deployed thousands of fishing boats to form floating barriers stretching 200 miles long. Some of the civilian fishing boats have been trained for military operations. China has used dual-purpose fishing boats to support its navy before, but it's rare to see so many gather in one place. Last week, the New York Times reported that roughly 1,400 Chinese vessels formed a rectangular formation in the East China Sea. And 1 month ago, about 2,000 Chinese fishing boats assembled in an L-shaped formation. Analysts told the outlets this suggests China has been bolstering its maritime militia. They say it could also be a test of how civilian vessels might support military operations against Taiwan. The fishing boats assembled near major shipping lanes close to Shanghai. Those lanes are considered strategically important for China in the event of a conflict over Taiwan. A former U.S. intelligence officer said Chinese fishing boats are too small to effectively carry out a blockade, but they could potentially impede U.S. warship operations. Some experts warn the fishing boats could be used to overwhelm radar or drone sensors or to help China reinforce its territorial claims. 3 Chinese nationals have been arrested in South Korea, accused of laundering more than $100 million in cryptocurrency. South Korean customs officials say the suspects were part of an international criminal ring that laundered roughly $107 million over nearly 4 years. According to local authorities on Monday, the group used an illegal cryptocurrency exchange, though it's still unclear which digital currencies were involved. South Korean customs officials added that the individuals received customer deposits through Chinese-owned apps like WeChat. Investigators say the suspects moved money through crypto accounts overseas and in South Korea before converting it into Korean currency. Then they funneled the money through multiple South Korean bank accounts. To avoid detection, the transactions were disguised as legitimate expenses, including cosmetic surgery fees and overseas education costs. The case comes as South Korea continues to delay finalizing clear rules for cryptocurrency, despite digital assets becoming a major investment option in the country. Israel's defense ministry has suspended the use of Chinese-made electric vehicles, including those by BYD, over serious cybersecurity concerns. The announcement earlier this week comes amid growing concerns that connected car technology could be used for espionage. The ban follows warnings from cybersecurity experts who say sensors and software in Chinese EVs could give Beijing insight into Israel's most sensitive military routines. Israel has already barred Chinese-made cars from military bases for similar reasons. Since late 2025, the military has begun phasing out the use of Chinese EVs by senior Israeli officers. In addition, reports say that the Israeli military recalled roughly 700 Chinese-made EVs since 2022. Officials point to the car's connected systems and cameras. They say the vehicles could potentially transmit sensitive data back to China or even allow remote control. Security experts warn that devices connected to the internet, especially electric vehicles, can serve as data collecting platforms that foreign governments could exploit. And by law, Chinese companies must share its collected data with the Chinese regime when requested, making these vehicles dangerous for commercial use. Data from the Israel Imported Vehicles Association shows Chinese EVs accounted for more than a third of all new car registrations in the third quarter of 2025. Experts warn that Israel may need to consider recalling all Chinese-linked EVs to protect national security. More than 100 people gathered outside a court in Ningbo City in southeastern China. The medical dispute case involving little Luoxi was heard. The 5-month-old baby died during a cardiac surgery 2 months ago. Public attention has continued to grow, making the case one of the hottest topics on Chinese social media. An investigation revealed medical malpractice. But the case seems to go beyond what meets the eye. Take a look.
The girl, Shu Luoxi, or Little Luoxi as Chinese netizens call her, underwent the surgery at the Women and Children's Hospital of Ningbo University on November 14. The surgeon said the surgery was intended to correct an unusual atrial septal defect located in the heart. He told the family this operation carried a success rate of over 99%. However, little Luoxi died during the procedure. The autopsy report showed that Luoxi did not have the unusual atrial septal defect, but a common one. Standard treatment for it involves observation until the child reaches 1 or 2 years old. Some cases resolve on its own without surgery, and performing surgery at such a young age carries greater risks. It raised questions about whether the surgery was actually needed. On top of that, the autopsy found a 2.5-inch surgical wound on Luoxi's body that had not been stitched up. The grieving family shared the case online, sparking public outrage and quickly going viral on Chinese social media. This case is not an isolated medical dispute, since China has been commercializing its healthcare system for decades. In other words, Chinese authorities have reduced funding for public hospitals and required them to generate revenue themselves. So public hospitals operate more like businesses, prioritizing income over public health. The logic is simple. More operations and more drug sales means more revenue. More cases have emerged of patients complaining that hospitals arranged unnecessary operations or that doctors prescribed the most expensive medicines.
Another death has drawn attention on Chinese social media. A well-known Hong Kong kung fu actor passed away last week after posting more than 20 messages speaking out for Luoxi. Bruce Leong was one of the few celebrities to do so. He also called for the punishment of human traffickers. Not even 1 day after that, he died suddenly of heart failure in a Chinese city near Hong Kong. His death wasn't announced until 5 days later. Some Chinese influencers are asking whether his death is related to his outspoken stance against the unfair treatment of people in China. Leong's students denied having any suspicions. China says its economy grew exactly 5% last year, a figure that precisely matches Beijing's official target. It's now fueling fresh accusations that the Chinese regime may be manipulating economic data. China announced a number through state media. The figure comes despite mounting economic pressures, including a property downturn, weak domestic demand, and ongoing trade tensions with the United States. Independent analysts dispute the official figure. The U.S.-based Rhodium Group estimates China's real growth closer to 2.5% to 3%, while one prominent Chinese economist puts it even lower. Gao Shanwen, former chief economist at SDIC Securities in Hong Kong, said China's actual growth may be around 2%. Sina News in China reported that he left his post after the remarks. Coming up, Britain has approved China's largest ever European embassy in London as its prime minister prepares for a possible visit to Beijing. Why is the UK allowing the project near critical financial data infrastructure despite major protests and with no objections from Britain's spy service? We break down what experts are saying after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Britain's government on Tuesday approved China building its largest embassy in London. This comes despite British and U.S. politicians' warnings that it could be used as a base for spying.
Despite everything China has done on our soil, China has been rewarded with exactly what they want, a super embassy that will be a base for espionage, not just in the UK, but likely across Europe as well. The government has capitulated to Chinese demands. The Prime Minister himself said to President Xi at the G20 in November 2024, and I quote, "You raised the Chinese embassy building in London when we spoke on the telephone. We have since taken action by calling in that application." In other words, the Prime Minister did precisely what President Xi told him to do, and then he faithfully reported back afterwards. This decision has serious implications. Last week, The Telegraph published plans showing 208 secret rooms and a hidden chamber just 1 metre from critical data cables. Our economy depends on those cables, so what assurance can the Minister give that those cables will be secure from Chinese interference?
The site is the 2-century-old Royal Mint Court near the Tower of London. China's plans have stalled for 3 years over opposition from local residents, lawmakers, and Hong Kong pro-democracy campaigners in Britain. Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping asked UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer last year to intervene. The decision was announced before an expected visit to China by Starmer this month, the first by a British leader since 2018. Some British and Chinese officials said the trip was dependent on the embassy being approved. The government said intelligence agencies devised a range of protective security measures. UK residents reacted to Britain's government approving China building its largest embassy in Europe in London. Listen.
We are in a dangerous geopolitical moment. China is explicit about their desire for what they call the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. That ideology is not about fair competition on the world stage. It's about subjugating the United States and reshaping the international order in the image of the Chinese Communist Party. When Keir Starmer goes to Beijing with the title deeds to the mega embassy in his pocket, I hope he will take with him copies of the Joint Committee on Human Rights report on slave labour and our supply chains, and read those sections that deal with the use of Uyghur slave labour. I hope he takes with him a copy of our report on transnational repression.
I am one of the Hong Kongers who has moved to the UK for political reasons. I have had a bounty of 1 million Hong Kong dollar imposed on me by the Chinese Communist Party. We know China. We know Chinese Communist Party and their intentions. Already, we have seen the United Kingdom fail to hold China to its promise over Hong Kong. Our people were abandoned to the mercy of the CCP.
I'm also from Hong Kong and also have a bounty placed on me. I'm angry and disappointed at Labour's government's decision. We have held several large protests outside the Roman Court, which have shown beyond doubt that the area is not suitable for an embassy. Major roads have been closed every time we have gathered, causing traffic chaos. We are also told that access to historic ruins on the site will be guarded by Chinese police. People like me will never be able to visit these sites of UK's heritage.
I do not have words to express the grief of my people at being abandoned by those we had come to rely upon. While Uyghurs like me are enslaved, shut up in camps, our women sterilized, our children forcibly separated and subjected to state-run indoctrination, and our voices silenced by threats against us and our families. The UK government is inviting the criminals responsible to create a huge outpost for their criminal behaviour here in London.
We residents have fought this application since we learned that our homes have been sold to China without warning. This has been a long David and Goliath fight. There is now only one way of stopping this: a judicial review. So I am today announcing that our judicial review to challenge the UK government's embassy decision begins today.
Why is Britain allowing China to build its largest European embassy next to critical financial data infrastructure? We've seen protests from lawmakers, residents, and Chinese dissidents in exile for a number of days against this. What message is the Prime Minister sending in allowing China to build this mega embassy? MI5, Britain's spy service, has not objected to the plans, despite warning about broader threats from China. Why is that? NTD's Don Ma spoke with Benedict Rogers for Insight. He's the co-founder of Hong Kong Watch and co-founder and deputy chair of the Conservative Party Human Rights Commission in the UK. Take a look.
Why is Britain allowing China to build its largest European embassy next to critical financial data infrastructure? Because, many have raised serious national security concerns.
Well, in my view, it is a massive mistake. So many voices cross-party, not only from the opposition parties, but from the governing party, the Labour Party itself, have expressed their concerns about it. Only last night in Parliament, there was an urgent question where several Labour members of Parliament opposed this. I think the primary reason why the government has done this is, first of all, they're concerned about the trade relationship with China. They want to prioritize that. Our economy faces, admittedly, quite a lot of challenges at the moment, and the Prime Minister seems to be putting trade above security concerns. He wants to visit China quite possibly in the next few weeks, and he knew that the visit was conditional upon approving this embassy. And I think there was one other factor, which is that the regime in Beijing was essentially holding the British embassy in Beijing to ransom. They were several times cutting off the water and the electricity. The British embassy in Beijing was in need of repair and extension. But instead of finding a mutually acceptable way forward, the British government has kowtowed to Beijing and basically given in to their bullying over this.
So what is the message then that the UK is sending by allowing this, by greenlighting this embassy?
I think it's an extremely dangerous message. It's essentially saying to Beijing that they can bully and threaten and intimidate their way to getting what they want. And, we all know in life the best way to treat bullies is to stand up to them. But that's not what the British government has done. It's given them what they've wanted. And that's a very dangerous message. I think it poses real concerns for our national security, for our values, not only in terms of espionage, but also in terms of the embassy's use for transnational repression against diaspora communities here in the UK. And there's one other factor that I feel very passionately about, which is that there is a British national, Jimmy Lai, who is facing the prospect of dying in prison in Hong Kong. He's 78 years old. He's been there already 5 years. He's awaiting sentence, but it will be a very long sentence, and he's in very poor health. And for the British Prime Minister to give in to Beijing over this embassy before demanding Jimmy Lai's release, before making it conditional on Jimmy Lai's release, I think is outrageous.
And you mentioned Jimmy Lai, other pro-democracy activists for Hong Kong as well. How could the creation of this embassy impact Chinese dissidents living in London and the UK overall?
Well, I think it will only increase the transnational repression that's already been underway. We've seen, for example, you've mentioned some of the groups affected, but we've seen Hong Kongers who've had bounties placed on their heads, then receiving threatening letters in their neighborhoods to their neighbors, urging their neighbors to hand them over to the Chinese embassy. I myself have had threatening letters at my home, and as my mother has as well. And I think all of that is going to be emboldened by the fact that the British government has given this embassy. It will be the largest in Europe. It will make it much easier for the Chinese to coordinate both their espionage and their transnational repression, because they'll all be in one huge building. And there's one other factor, which is that when these plans were originally proposed, the Metropolitan Police in London opposed them because they said that the space outside the embassy would be very difficult to police if in large-scale protests. And we've proven their point correct, because we've had many protests in the last year, and it causes big disruption to the traffic. So the question is, will protests be able to continue once the embassy is established there? And will diaspora communities feel safe enough to protest outside this building? We had the incident a few years ago of the consulate in Manchester, where Chinese diplomats physically assaulted Hong Kong protesters, dragged them through the gates of that consulate. It's not hard to imagine the same thing happening in this new site.
You know what I find strange, Benedict? MI5, Britain's spy service, has not objected to the plans, despite warning about broader threats from China. Why is that?
Well, it's a question that only they can really answer. What I do know is that quite a number of senior former intelligence officers, and including the former head of MI6, has spoken out against it. As to why the current intelligence services have not is a matter for them. But I should emphasize that I do have great respect and trust in our intelligence agencies. It's not them that are to blame for this. It's the politicians that have made this decision.
Okay, Benedict, thank you for speaking with us today. I know it's rather late on your side, so really appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.